Okay, just to say, this is our second Republican Socialist Zoom meeting. And we've invited Alan Armstrong from the Republican Communist Network to speak about the political situation in Scotland. So I'm going to hand over to Alan, and let's hear, Alan, what your analysis of the situation is.
First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to do this meeting this evening. When I look at the political situation in Scotland, I very much want to place it in an all-Ireland's framework. So we'll be looking at England, Wales, and Ireland, North and South at the same time. But before I can do that, I'm going to be using some terms that I want to explain. First term I will use is liberal unionism. By liberal unionism, I mean a unionism that upholds the UK state but sees the necessity for political devolution or home rule in the past. Conservative unionism, however, upholds the UK state in a different manner. The UK state has always been a unionist state. There have always been these constituent units to it, and it's recognised that, but the way it tries to hold them together is through administrative devolution, not through home rule or devolution. However, if the devolution gets passed anywhere and it becomes the new order, then conservative unionists are prepared to accept that, and that becomes part of the new conservative unionism. Then we've got reactionary unionism. Now, reactionary unionism is prepared to actually stop any liberal unionist measures and or even overthrow them. Good example of this would be back in the days just before the First World War, when you had the Third Home Rule Bill and the mass mobilisation of reactionary unionism in Northern Ireland, allied with the Tories in Scotland, including the preparation for armed resistance if necessary. We see it again today with the Johnson government, which is prepared to unravel the devolutionary settlement that's there. The fourth term I'm going to be used is constitutional nationalism. Now, this is something you find in Scotland, Wales, and in Ireland. Basically, it is parties that look for greater self-determination up to independence, but the way they want to get it is to use the existing constitution of the UK, right? They don't challenge that. There is a revolutionary nationalism, and perhaps the best example in this would have been Sinn Féin in the past, before the Good Friday Agreement. It was prepared to go for independence and challenge the UK state using extra constitutional methods and even armed struggle if necessary. So those are the five terms I'm going to use. And now I'm going to have a look at Scotland after December the 12th in the context of that election. So if we go around each of the countries in turn, what's remarkable is how different the situation is in each country. You take England, for example, right? Who's in office after December the 12th? Well, first, obviously, it's Boris Johnson's Tories. And what are they? They're Europhobic reactionary unionists. They're the dominant by far in England. And if you like, if there's any behind them, the Labour Party, Keir Starmer's Labour Party, and it's conservative unionist, right? In the past, the Labour Party might have been in the UK might have been considered liberal unionist. That is gone. So you've got reactionary unionism versus conservative unionism in England. If you go to Wales, it's different. In Wales, the Labour Party came out on top, although it was badly dented. And the Labour Party in Wales is a liberal unionist party. It does want more devolution for Wales. It's actually advanced devolution quite marked in alliance with both the Lib Dems and Plaid Cymru in the past. It still is a liberal unionist party. But breathing down its neck is a conservative and reactionary unionism of the Tory party. And actually the constitutional nationalists are third. Plaid Cymru are third there. If you go to Northern Ireland, different again. Here you've got nobody overall domination, but the constitutional nationalists of the Sinn Féin and the SDLP, along with, and they were in a sort of a temporary alliance here, along with the liberal unionists of the Alliance Party, they overtook the reactionary unionists of by the DUP. Having said that, the reactionary unionists are still very much there, the DUP there, and on top of that, they've got the reactionary unionists have got something they haven't got anywhere else. There are there are only paramilitary groups. Right, they've ditched their guns for the moment, some of the loyalist groups, but they are still prepared for physical confrontation and, will go around and physically intimidate people. So that's Northern Ireland. If you go to the Irish Republic, which had its election on February the 8th, there you've got, at first glance, it looked as if the constitutional nationalists Sinn Féin were the big victors on that particular night. Remember, because they came first, but they only got 25% of the vote, and the expectations that might be a breakthrough, have been stymied because every other party, including Fine Gael, Fine Gael, by the Labour Party and now by the Green Party, have gone into a coalition to block them, and they're conservative constitutional nationalists. And that finally brings us to Scotland. Now in Scotland, the Westminster election was an overwhelming victory for the SNP, which are very much a constitutional nationalist party, right? And they made gains at the expense of all the other parties. The challengers are now conservative and reactionary unionists from particularly the Tory party, and in this, the Labour Party's fallen back even further, but it is a conservative unionist one. But the gap is quite big with them. So a very different pattern in all the constituent units of the UK, plus the Republic. And the interesting thing about this is that this creates a situation. How does the British ruling class rule the UK and have its influence over the Republic in a situation where it's such a varied pattern? And first, I'm going to have a look at how Johnson is able to control these things, despite the fact it's actually only in England that the Tories have a big majority. First thing that Johnson has going for him is that he is in control of the UK state and is prepared to use all the UK's crown powers to override any national challenges. And all of the other parties, from whether it be the Labour Party in Wales, Plaid Cymru, or whether it be the Scottish Nationalist Party, or whether if you go to Northern Ireland, it's the SNLP and Sinn Féin, every one of these parties, to get further advance, need a liberal unionist party in power. They have no strategy that to take on the crown powers that Boris Johnson will use them. So he's got the crown powers there, and he's quite prepared to face them down. On top of that, he's quite prepared actually to take apart even the devolutionary settlement that is already there. The other thing he has going for him in Northern Ireland, under May, the DUP was a party that challenged her, and actually overplayed its cards. It was really pushing May, threatening all sorts of things. Now, after that general election, the DUP got a bad knocking back, and what Johnson has been able to do, he's been able to restart up Stormont and the Northern Ireland executive on his terms. He's got the DUP exactly where they want them. What he wants them is, your job is to maintain the union in Northern Ireland, and I'm going to tell you how you do that. And on top of that, the setup that's been set up is a sort of bisectarian setup. Resurrection of Stormont's a bisectarian setup by which the UK state places itself as arbiter between nationalists and unionists. And when it comes to subventions from Westminster, they argue with each other on sectarian terms how the money will be divvied up, and they appeal to Westminster to help them do that. And furthermore, they've actually got the backing of the Northern Irish Committee, the Irish Congress of Trade Unions, and they've got something called Fresh Start, which is about minimising the effects of the cuts, but not opposing them. Of course, the other major thing that he has going for him is he's got the backing of Trump. To have the backing the leader of the most powerful state in the world is quite something as well. So And the last thing he has going, lots of people, he went into the election saying, get Brexit done. And a lot of people, if you like, in a sense, been conned by that, get Brexit done. But actually, get Brexit done is not the end of it. What we're now getting is keep Brexit on the road. And by that, it's going to be used constantly to whip up hatred against EU and migrants. That's going to be a constant backdrop to the secret negotiations that are going on with Trump to hand over huge chunks of like the National Health Service, but lots of other things over to the United States. So keep Brexit on the road is the other thing. And the other, I suppose the last thing is he has an all UK and Ireland strategy, and he's up against, look at each of these countries, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Ireland, they are fragmented. They do not have any overall policy, except you're hoping that somehow they could put pressure on them to either be Indy Ref 2 or in Northern Ireland. They're calling for a referendum. That is just not going to happen. So it's in quite a strong position. Now let's focus now then specifically in Scotland. And out of the general election, the SNP emerged with 45 out of 59 of the seats, which is quite a strong position. But the SNP has been challenged from below. The SNP has been wanting Indy Ref 2. It actually said 2020 was going to be the year for Indy Ref 2. Everybody knew that wasn't going to happen. For Nicola Sturgeon, though, it's been let off the hook by COVID-19. That has given them an excuse, we've got other things to do, so we're putting this on the back burner. Now, that is not satisfying the rank and file of the SNP or the wider independence movement. And just to give an example of that, back in January the 11th, 80,000 people marched through the streets of Glasgow demanding Indy Ref 2, right? Nobody from the SNP came along, to address this meeting. This is a movement from below. It's been there. It's had demonstrations of up to 150,000 in the past. But on the wettest day in January, 80,000 people marching. That would be the equivalent of 800,000 people in London. So this is quite a big thing. So there's this tension that is emerging. And that tension is beginning to create cracks in the SNP. Now, the SNP is the most centralised party in the UK, apart from Sinn Féin. It is a very disciplined party. If you were to have a look at its Westminster performance or its Holyrood performance, look at its Westminster performance, and if you look at votes over the last 2 years, the Tory party's often been all over the place, the Labour party's been all over the place. The SNP has been a very disciplined party, so it has this, so acts in a very disciplined way. The tensions are kept inside the party. Now, there's a problem with that, and for them, the problem is, of course, the tensions are real, and if there are no safety valves at all, then, when discontent becomes major, it could really blow apart. And, these tensions have been rising. Particularly, there's two things that have done that. The Alex Salmond trial. Alex Salmond, was on trial for sexual assault, and a lot of people said, he's going to go down as a result of this trial. Now, in the end, the trial went ahead, and he got off on all of the charges. And so, a wing of the SNP are now using this as an argument. Alex Salmond would be a far better leader. He would challenge Johnson far more effectively, and he has with him somebody, Joanna Cherry, who is also saying we could challenge the UK Boris Johnson more effectively. Now, Joanna Cherry has a history. She was one of the people behind this taking this. The government to the Supreme Court last year when Boris Johnson tried to prorogue the Parliament. Her and an ally managed to get, she's a senior lawyer, she was a very competent senior lawyer. She managed to get this ruling from the Supreme Court that, in actual fact, that Johnson had acted unconstitutionally. The only problem was of course, that Johnson just ignored that altogether. When he ignored that, he knew he had the British ruling class behind him. He knew he could override that, and he was getting ready for an election. So Joanna's strategy did not work then, and it will not work. Now, what would they actually try to do? Their idea is perhaps have more demonstrations, a bit more parliamentary fireworks down in London. But when it comes to it, Johnson is no more going to back off for Joanna Cherry, that wing of the SNP, than he is for Nicola Sturgeon. So there's still that particular problem. Let's have a look at Nicola Sturgeon's own strategy. Her own strategy is, yes, she does want independence, but at a very slow pace. She says we want to have 60% support in the opinion polls before we do that. Now, what she reflects are the conservative big business interests that are now behind the SNP, and they don't want to do anything that rocks the boat. Basically, they're waiting in the long run for the government to fall apart, a bit like Sir Keir Starmer, in actual fact, for the government to fall apart. And when that happens, they hope that they will be able to come to a deal with a new government in the future to allow another indie ref. It depends on that. That's her particular strategy. She comes from something that's important, though. She comes from out of the 2014 indie ref thing, where that indie ref was fought on a fairly, pretty progressive basis. You could see it when it came to who was was allowed to vote. Everybody who was an EU resident got a vote, as well as everybody in Scotland, and the vote was extended to 1618, because the basis of, if you like, the SNP's nationalism is its civic nationalism. If you want to, you can be Scottish if you want to be Scottish, and that's it. That's very different from what you were up against and Better Together, and what even more so with the Brexit one, and they have an ethnic version of nationalism. And that is, there are certain criteria you've got to meet before you can be recognised as British. And it was Gordon Brown who came up with these things way back when he was in government. It was also the time he came up with the British Jobs for British Workers. So he was pursuing quite a right-wing thing. And then Michael Gove took this up as well. So when it came to the Brexit referendum, for example, you only got the vote if you were British, or if you're in one of the former colonies like Cyprus, or if you're somebody from in this country, from Malta, from Cyprus, or from Gibraltar. But the European resident and 16 or 18-year-olds just didn't get it at all. That's important, because that sort of liberal thing has continued even up to as recently as February, because there was an act through the Scottish Parliament in February, which is called the Scottish Election Franchise Representation Act. And the effect of that was the vote's been extended in Holyrood and local elections to all foreign residents living in Scotland, all refugees and short-term prisoners. Now, it's just inconceivable to imagine that that could happen in England, that these people would be extended the vote. So there is a difference there. So she does still represent that. Now, what about the other side? They are now beginning to move away in steps from that. Joanna Cherry's first marker down has been to announce very publicly she's against gender self-recognition, which was something that was going to get passed through the Parliament in Scotland. So she's beginning to say, actually, no, our version of who is Scottish is not necessarily everybody. There are certain people. And then behind her, there are other people who have a sort of almost mirror image of Farage version of what it is to be Scottish, an ethnic version. The worst examples are Sean McGill, which is a far-right nationalist organisation. You've also got something called Scottish Resistance, which dabbles in these sort of areas. And these sort of people are beginning to, if they mobilise, they will want to in actual fact create a different form of independence movement, and one that's so Joanna Cherry doesn't want to go right down that road. But she's playing with forces that are quite dangerous. I don't know whether Alex Salmond wants to come back at all with Joanna Cherry as proxy. But you've got these divisions that have come out between these, and they could be, quite pleasant. Some people are already saying we've got the Holyrood election in 2021. That's next year. Tories are reveling in this growing split and saying this is the end of the SNP. I doubt that is the case, because actually the support for the SNP is much wider. Many SNP members refusing to get drawn in to this debate, they actually say what we want is a campaign with Nicola Sturgeon and Alex Salmond. Naively saying that, but they want that. But even if the SNP was to be dented badly in that election, and I'm not sure at all they will be, the movement will still go. Remember, actually, in 2014, where after having lost the independence referendum, the SNP in the next election then went to get 56 out of 59 seats. I just don't see the unions able to make a substantial comeback. But the danger for ourselves as Republicans is getting drawn in behind one of these two wings. And the key point about these two wings is neither of them have a strategy. They both depend on, the UK state conceding a referendum when we know that's not going to happen. So my argument is this is now a time when Republican socialists can come out and say, we have been saying since 2014 that there is no way, liberal unionist way forward. There's no alliance to be made there. You're going to have to start defying the UK state. And one of the things that actually helps in some ways is not so much what the independence movement is doing, is what Boris Johnson and company are doing. The way they appear is so horrific that, the polls in Scotland have gone up from 47, 48% support independence to now a continuous number, 4 consecutive ones, which saw 53 to 54%. And these are people who were quite strong union supporters in the past. In particular, they have seen on television over COVID-19, they've seen Boris Johnson and they've seen Nicola Sturgeon. There's not a lot of difference between their two approaches, but Nicola Sturgeon appears competent, and my downstairs neighbour, who is very much a unionist, now talks about Nicola and how she'll be okay for us. Along the road, a Labour Party friend I had for years, who called out, up to 2014, said, there's no way I'm going to vote for independence. Voting for Alex Salmond is voting for Mussolini. Even he is saying he might in the next one vote that. So there is a swing from below there. But we do need the Republican and radical independence campaign, which is nominally Republican but needs to be actively Republican, does start to need to take these arguments. I'm just going to finish off with one last thing is it's not just that these SNP doesn't have a road forward because of the roadblock provided by the Action Unionists. They are united in being a pro-business party. There was one little thing that happened on May the 20th. There was a vote in Holyrood, and it came from there was an amendment to a post-COVID one, which came from the Greens, in Scottish Greens in Parliament, which was to provide relief to people, in rented accommodation, and also allowed trade unions to access care homes. So they do that. The SNP voted against that because of the lobbying of the property companies, and they voted against that. Now, everybody voted against it, every single SNP one, which side they were on. So what that shows is both wings of these remain very much pro-business, and when it comes to it, anti-union. So that's another aspect as well of the politics that we have to take up. And, so I'm just going to finish off with that, but I started by looking at around each of the countries. The last thing, if you like, Republican Socialists and the Radical Independence campaign has to do is to make sure it takes its campaign into England, Wales, and Scotland. It did that between 2012 and 2014. It's even more important we do that again. The arguments are going to be easier to make in Wales. There's already all under one banner movement starting there. I think it will become a bit easier in the Republic as well. But in England, I mean, you know, the voices did listen into 2012 to 2014. You know, that sort of English stroke British internationalism, which we're very much up against. I think it can be dented, but we have to mount this international Mablow campaign, which is break up the UK state. And I think there will be more voices listening to us now because there is not a hint of a liberal unionist way forward. And in England, there were liberal unionists even in 2014. So Keir Starmer has killed that off altogether. So where are all the people around Corbyn going to go look to just now as a way forward? We've got to appeal to these people to join us. And so we're going to finish off with that appeal to people who are going to watch this from England. There'll be further meetings, Zoom meetings on this. Come in on them and be discussing these issues. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Alan. I'm going to finish the recording now then. Okay, thank you.